60% mental and 40% physical.
Math was never our strong suit, but breaking down Ohio State football is. Sit back and join us for Buckeye Grove Instant Access, part of the Unscripted Ohio Podcast Network.
You can do it!
Brought to you by BuckeyeGrove.com. Post-game thoughts, immediate analysis, and much, much more to put the big game into perspective. Without any further delay of game, here's your host, Kevin Noon.
Kevin, goddammit.
Hey, welcome to the BIA podcast. We are 24 hours, maybe even a little bit less, away from the Big Ten championship game. Then again, we have been in that type of position before, only to see things derail, so let's not jinx anything. It has been an odd season, to say the least, here in 2020. Ohio State sitting 5-0, champions of the East, getting ready to face the Northwestern Wildcats, champions of the West. If the Buckeyes win, it would be a fourth consecutive outright Big Ten championship, first time ever in conference history, now that we are in the championship era, rather than just letting the standings decide that and co-champions and whatnot. A potential berth in the college football playoff on the line. And for Northwestern on the other side, a chance to get a little payback for 2018 and a 45-24 game where Ohio State was able to get past them. Dwayne Haskins threw for $4.99 in that game. We're going to, as we do on our Friday podcast when we have the opportunity, we're going to talk to somebody who knows Ohio State's opponent well. And we're talking to one of the people I've known the longest in this industry in terms of the Rivals.com era. We're going to go to Wildcat Report and Louis Vicaire of the site. And I've known him for what feels like a million years. And, Louis, welcome to the show and, glad to have you on board.
Yeah, glad to be here, Kevin. And we do go back a long way. You're the guy that hired me, so you're responsible for this in the first place. So that was 2004, I think. So we've known each other. Yeah, we go back quite a ways.
Yeah, and I'm sure that when I'm not on the air with you, you're secretly cussing at me for dragging you down this rabbit hole or whatnot. Back in the days when I worked at Rivals Corporate and not over at BuckeyeGrove.com, but It's been a wild ride, I would say, for you in terms, without going too far down this path. In 16 years of covering the Cats, you've seen some lean times, and you've certainly seen some good times. And right now, sitting 6-1 or whatnot, probably one of the better teams in terms of record.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's been some very good years here. These are kind of like the golden years. The Fitz era has been pretty darn good. They haven't gotten that Big Ten title yet, but he's been, consistent bowl games. They've won some bowl games, which is something. They had the longest losing streak in bowls in the nation. They've won the last 3 in a row, and they've had 3 10-win teams in the last several years here. So, yeah, things are good here in Evanston.
And they certainly are good, and I don't know if a lot of people truly believed that Northwestern would be the last team standing in terms of the Big Ten West. I mean, I think a lot of people, either coming out of the East or from a national perspective, just default to Wisconsin year in or year out or whatnot. Regardless if it was Jack Cohn or Graham Mertz or whoever they were going to put there, they were going to figure out how to run the ball, play defense, and whatnot. And then it just never really happened. And then I think a lot of people thought, well, maybe Iowa, maybe Nebraska figures it out. I mean, I think a lot of people thought that Northwestern was kind of a one-year anomaly at that point. Hey, they can be pretty good, but can they hold up through a whole Big Ten season? And lo and behold, they're the last team standing.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I really thought that they could contend this year. I really did. Once they landed Peyton Ramsey, last year was a complete disaster, right? So they get to the Big Ten title game in 2018. They win their bowl game, their third bowl in a row, and things are looking great. And then they did a face plant last year, right? Quarterback position was complete disarray. It was a disaster. They go 3-9. And Fitz was defiant at the end of the year. And, he basically said, you better beat us now because we're going to be back next year. And he was right. I mean, I thought that they could contend for the West, honestly. But the way they've done it this year, you talked about Iowa. They beat them second game of the season. They were down 17-0 first quarter, came back, beat them 21-20. They had Wisconsin. They were ranked in the top 10 at that point, and they were 2-0, I believe it was, and came into Evanston, and Northwestern took them down 17-7. So they've done what they've had to do. They have an outstanding defense. Their offense does enough to get by, and we're sitting here at 6-1 after a 3-9 disaster last year. It's been a pretty remarkable turnaround, and it's been a heck of a ride for fans.
And I would think that fans of college football in general would expect a Northwestern team, a Pat Fitzgerald-led team, to get it done with defense and to get it done with linebackers. And Northwestern certainly has a crew right now. I've heard all the things of the firm of Fisher and Gallagher and Bergen. If I'm getting a name wrong, I apologize. What is the what is the DNA of this defense? I mean, I can kind of go back to remembering game prep before the 2018 championship game. Really throw that 19 year out of the record books. I don't really think about that one much. And Ryan Day and everybody and Urban Meyer at that point would say, Northwestern is a team that keeps everything in front of you. They make you earn it. I went through the stats. It's not like they've given up really any long plays. I mean, certainly nothing 40 yards or longer this year. But, this is supposed to be defensive coordinator Mike Hankiewicz's swan song, his final game. If Northwestern's able to get past Ohio State, it would be the 400th win that he would be a part of as an assistant coach. What makes this defense tick?
Yeah, I think it begins with Hankwitz. You're right. He has really transformed the program. Because you remember, even, Pat Fitzgerald he's a former linebacker, and you think, oh, yeah, they're always going to be good on defense. But if you remember his early years, Northwestern was an offensive team. They scored a lot of points, and they couldn't stop anybody. They were playing in, 45, 40 shootouts every week. It was crazy. But Hankwitz came in 2008, and over time, he has really transformed this defense. And what they are this year, especially, I think this is his best defense that they've had. You mentioned the linebackers. It starts there. That's their strongest unit without a doubt. The Irish law firm, as you alluded to, you got Patty Fisher, the 4-year starter in the middle. Blake Gallagher on one side. Those two guys have over 300 tackles in their career. I mean, those guys have been around a long time, played a lot of football. And then you got Chris Bergen, second year as a starter. He's a former walk-on. And they've got 3 guys with over 200 career tackles. It's the only team in college football that can say that. And this year, I think the difference, Northwestern, even last year during the disaster and the last few years, they've been very good on defense. Where this team separates itself is, number one, with turnovers. Last year, they had 14 all season. They got 22 in 7 games. And their secondary has been outstanding. Brandon Joseph, redshirt freshman safety, he just was named freshman of the year, made first team all Big Ten. He's got 5 picks. Greg Newsome, another first team all Big Ten cornerback. He's really kind of he's the guy that gives the defense its swagger. He's a very un-Northwestern-like guy. If you haven't seen him play a whole lot, he will get in guys' faces. He likes to talk out there. He's got a lot of confidence, And he's been just a tremendous, he's locked on to the top receiver, and it really enables the defense to do a lot of things. And, I think, though, what carries over is they are very fundamentally sound. They play like a cover 4 as their base defense. Like you talked about, they'll play that shell. They'll keep things in front of them and tackle well. And they turn you over. They're very strong in the red zone. They're 9th, I think, in the nation in red zone. They're number 2 in scoring. They've allowed 14.6 points a game, number 2 in the nation, and they're number 1 in pass efficiency defense. I'm not sure exactly what that stat is, but they've been very good on the back end. And like you talked about, they don't give you big plays, and they're tough in the red zone, and they're a heck of a team to watch.
You're listening to the BIA podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Noon, and I'm joined by Wildcat Report's Louis Vicoeur, and we are talking about the upcoming Big Ten championship game between Ohio State and Northwestern, 12 o'clock Eastern on Fox on Saturday. We had an opportunity to talk before, at least before I put pen to paper at any point, really, to kind of talk about this game. And in my conversation with you, I kind of brought up what Indiana was able to do in terms of blitzing, a lot of A-gap pressure against Justin Fields. Ohio State forced Fields into some bad decisions, 3 interceptions, which matches the total of interceptions he had the previous year. Do you think that Northwestern has a package in its defense that is not such deviation from who they are and what they do, that's something that we could see in some sort of iteration in this game?
I think so. Yeah, I mean, that's what I think Coach Hank is doing. I think he'll dial up some blitzes, and where I think he's so good is disguising them, right? I think they bring pressure in different ways with different players. They don't do it a whole lot, but when they do, they several times this year when they get somebody in a third and long or something like that, they will send everybody, and it catches people off guard. They're going to have to do something, right? You can't let Justin Fields just sit back there and pick you apart. And especially, the longer time he has, it's the more time for those fast wide receivers to get down the field, right? Where I think there's a lot of confidence in Newsome on one side. The other cornerback, whether it's Ruiz or Hampton, whoever, they've both kind of been playing there on the other corner, to put him in one-on-one with a Olave or a Wilson, that's a scary proposition. You can't do that too often. So I don't think you're going to see it a whole lot, but I think that they will throw some wrinkles at them. I think you'll see some things they haven't done this year, and I think they're going to try to be aggressive. They're going to try to take it to Ohio State. They're not just going to sit back. I think they're going to try, because I don't think they're going to get a whole lot of pressure with just their front four. We'll have to see, but I think that they will throw some wrinkles, and I think Coach Hankwitz will have them ready to, I think they'll try to confuse or at least make Fields uncomfortable back there.
And we'll talk about the other side of the ball here in a second. I think that it's certainly going to be the interesting part to see what Ohio State's offense is going to be able to do against this defense. You go back to 2018, and as I had mentioned, Dwayne Haskins throws for 499 in a 45-24 win, but some of those points were kind of pile-on points toward the end as Ohio State, maybe trying to have some style points. I mean, they were certainly plays that were there. I don't think that Ohio State necessarily went out and tried to rub anybody's face in it, but it was what it was, an Ohio State team that maybe wasn't as balanced as this 2020 team. I think you look at Ohio State. Ohio State is 7th in the nation in running, 24th in passing, 251 on the ground, 281 in the air. But I think the X factor really is Justin Fields and his ability not only as a thrower and the receivers that he has, question being, who may be available for this game, but also Fields, the runner. And, I go through the roster of quarterbacks that Northwestern's faced this year, and certainly has not been a Fields-esque type of dual threat to what I see. I mean, Rocky Lombardi or Brandon Peters certainly does not, the only one I guess I could sit there and say is the game against Nebraska, and I'm not even sure if the Cats ended up facing Adrian Martinez there, or if they ended up getting Luke McCaffrey in that game. But how do you go about trying to account for everything that Fields is capable of doing, whereas he is a very different quarterback than Haskins 2 years ago?
Yeah, absolutely. And I will say though, Haskins played, that might have been his best game too. I mean, he was dynamite against Northwestern. That guy just didn't miss. He had a heck of a game, and Northwestern had a banged up secondary, and they came back. You remember that game? They scored 2 touchdowns there to start the third quarter, and it was 24-21, and the fans were feeling it, and they made it a game there for a while, and then it seemed like Haskins just hit the gas pedal and they took off. But with Justin Fields, the scary proposition is that running, because that's something that Northwestern has had problems with. You bring up Nebraska. Nebraska ran the ball well on them. They racked up a lot of yards. That most yards they gave up all season. And they faced both. Like Martinez had kind of a rough day, but he did some damage on the ground. And then they brought in McCaffrey, and he did as well. Even like Rocky Lombardi, in the lone loss to Michigan State, he killed them with runs. Which is, Rocky Lombardi's not a guy that's known for his mobility, but he made some plays on third down. He picked up some big third downs that really changed the complexion of the game and really gave the defense something to think about. So, that's an issue. That's something that they're going to have to weigh. We talked about putting pressure on them. Well, you also have to contain them, right? You got to keep them boxed in, because that guy, once he gets on the edge, and he keeps his eyes downfield and things break apart and he extends the play and, he can find someone downfield on you. So he's a dangerous proposition, a handful. He's the best quarterback, in the Big Ten for sure. He's the best guy that Northwestern will see this year. And you're right. He's the X factor. He's the guy that makes that team go, and he can hurt you so many different ways. And I think what's, scary or dangerous about Ohio State is, it's big plays that can get you, right? They can score in a hurry. You can play a great 3 quarters and then they'll blitz you in that 1 quarter for 28 points and, the game's over. So it's Justin Fields is going to be a handful. It's a huge challenge for this defense. But they're going to be ready for it. This is the best Northwestern defense I've seen, since Pat Fitzgerald was running around with a neck roll in the 90s. These guys are pretty good.
Damn, we're getting old, aren't we? But we'll go from we'll go from Ohio State's quarterback to Northwestern's quarterback, Peyton Ramsey, on the other side of this quick break.
Egg Water Conditioning has been treating well in city water in Central Ohio with American-made water filtration products for over 60 years. Have a water quality problem? The water treatment experts at Hague know how to solve it. Not sure if your water softener is working? They will test, inspect, and sanitize any brand of water softener for only $20. Schedule a system checkup or water test today by calling 614-836-2195 or visit them online at HagueH2O.com. That's HagueH2O.com.
Welcome back to the BIA show. I'm your host, Kevin Noon. I'm joined by Wildcat Report's Louis Vicker, and we're talking about the upcoming Ohio State-Northwestern Big Ten championship game. On the first side of the break, we talked about Ohio State's offense against Northwestern's defense. Let's go to the other side. And Peyton Ramsey has played in 3 games against Ohio State when he was a member of the Indiana Hoosiers. Excuse me. And, we'll kind of cross 2017 off because that was kind of garbage time, 2 or 3 for 10 yards. I think everybody wants to circle that 2018 game where he was 26 of 49 for 322, 3 touchdowns, and no picks. And that was against an Ohio State secondary that had some issues and a defense in general that had some issues. And I think any Ohio State fan out there will remember back shoulder throw after back shoulder throw after back shoulder throw, and they just really couldn't do anything. And Ohio State still won the game handily, but it was way too close to comfort, or for comfort in that game. And then in 2019, it was a little bit more pedestrian, 19 of 37, buck 62, no touchdowns and a pick. And now you got Ramsey, who's about a 60% passer this year, and an offense that, as Louis mentioned earlier in the show, does enough to get by. But certainly, outside of a 43-3 thrashing of Maryland, the Cats haven't broken 30. None of the numbers. I mean, the only game where any number jumps off the page is the last one, where Northwestern ran for 411. But I want to talk about Ramsey in general right now. What has Ramsey brought to this offense, and is this offense capable of being able to put up that type of big game when his high water mark is, as I'm looking right here, 239 yards against Wisconsin, or 3 touchdowns against Purdue seem to be kind of the high water marks for him?
Yeah, I'll tell you, you can't overstate what a difference maker he's been. And I know, like you talked about, his numbers are pretty pedestrian, right? He's at 60%. He's got 9 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. But he had made the plays when they needed him to. He seems to be at his best on third down, in the red zone. When they need a play, he makes it. And I think he's been, I would call him more of a game manager, certainly. But when they needed a big game, like against Wisconsin or something like that, he comes through. He's the guy that when they look in the clutch, they look for number 12, and he has come through, several times this season. And you look at where they're coming from, too. You got to remember, 2019, their quarterback play was the worst I've seen in the Big Ten. It was unbelievable. I mean, they couldn't get in the right calls and the right protections a lot of times. And this guy is a steady leader. He's very calm in the pocket, and he's got a little better mobility than I expected him to have. He can make some plays on the run. He can hurt you a little bit with his feet as well. And he's a smart player. He takes what the defense gives him, puts the ball in the right guy's hand at the right time, And it's nothing sexy or anything like that. He doesn't rack up big numbers. But he's been the difference because this team, unlike past Northwestern teams, cannot run the ball. And everybody's talking about, well, they ran for 411 yards last week against Illinois. That was number one, it was Illinois' defense, which wasn't good to start with, and they were missing 6 guys. I think it was 7 by the time of kickoff due to COVID and injuries and things like that. So that was a really depleted defense, and they rammed the ball down their throat. And other than that opener, they ran for 325 against Maryland, and they ran for 411 against Illinois the last time out. And in between that was pretty much a wasteland. They never got to 150 in any game, and their 3 games before Illinois, they had a total of 167 yards in 3 games on the ground, So they've been able to do it with the passing game, and they make enough plays here and there. And I will say this, too, you say where the point's going to come from. Well, when your defense is only allowing 14.6 points per game, you don't need that many points, right? The offense has been able to give them just enough of what they need to win games. And Ramsey has just been, he's been such a steadying influence. He's a leader out there, and he has really been a difference maker for this offense.
We always like to go back to the big book of football truisms or whatnot, and, good defense trumps good offense or whatnot. I mean, an Ohio State scoring offense is scoring 46.6. So, I mean, you have a major chasm between, the points that Ohio State's scoring and the points that Northwestern is allowing. It's certainly going to be interesting to see. I guess my question is, if Northwestern can't run the ball, how can it play a station-to-station 6-7 yards a pop type of offense in terms of the throwing game to keep Ohio State's offense off the field? I mean, is that the path for them to win? Is to try and take the air out of the ball, limit Ohio State's number of offensive possessions, or is it like, hey, we do this against all comers? Just bring it on. We'll get you behind the chains, and we'll force you to punt, and we'll just kind of do our thing.
Yeah, well, they play complementary football, right? They know they're gonna win with defense, so they do play conservative on the offensive end. But I think, I don't buy into the notion that they're going to be able to run. I don't think they're going to get very much with, running backs between the tackles. They'll try some quarterback runs. They'll do some jet sweeps, just enough to keep them honest. But I think you hit it. They're going to try to use the short passing game as sort of a extension of the running game. They like to run crossing patterns, get guys over the middle, get the corner or safety in a trail technique and try to lead them out that way. They do a lot of rubs on the outside. They'll use screen passes. And I think they're going to try to do that. They'll try to, stay ahead of the chains like you talked about. First down is going to be very big. They don't want to get into third and long situations where the defensive line can tee off on them. I think the offensive line is going to be a concern against that Ohio State front seven. We'll see how that goes. But I think that's what they're going to have to do. They're going to put the game on Ramsey's shoulders. They've got some veteran receivers out there, Ramad Chalkiel Bowman and Riley Lees, John Rain, the tight end. Those guys have played a lot of football, Kyrick McGowan, and find some soft spots in that zone. Because the thing is, against the pass defense, because if you look at Ohio State, their pass defense, there are some yards to be had there, I think. They got the worst pass defense in the Big Ten, and they're 111th in the country. And I know a lot of that is because they get big leads and teams got to throw. And in the second half, a lot of those games are over. But it's still remarkable, to me, like when does Ohio State ever last in anything? So that's something I think, looking at that Indiana game and the points they put up and looking at the secondary, there's some hope that even without a consistent running game, that they could do enough in the passing game to at least stay in the game, And then in the second half, Northwestern's a second half team. Ohio State's not. Northwestern, they're in one-score games all the time. That's how they make their living. Ohio State, they're not a battle-tested team, I don't think. So if they can get into the fourth quarter with it still relatively close, maybe they got a shot, a puncher's chance. I think that's kind of their mentality going in.
Exactly. And you look at Ohio State allowing almost 269 yards a game on the ground, via the pass. But again, when Ohio State only plays 5 games and you have that Indiana game in there where, Michael Penix threw for 11 million yards, that's certainly going to skew the numbers. But even if you look at the pass efficiency defense, which I agree, I don't really have the formula down on there. Ohio State sitting at 60th of 127 teams. You just don't know. Ohio State giving up 23.2 points a game, a little atypical for an Ohio State defense. Definitely not, the 2018 defense in terms of just breakdown after breakdown and chunk play after chunk play. My final question, and I want to thank you for being part of the show, is, and you touched upon some of these things, but what do you think is the number one key? And I'm not going to ask you a prediction. I'll post that in the comments section in terms of where you listen to the podcast, so you can check it out on BuckeyeGrove.com. But what do you think the number one key is for Northwestern to be successful, more so than just saying Peyton Ramsey playing a solid A game? Outside of that, what is the biggest key?
Well, I guess it's cliche, but I think it's got to be turnovers, right? And that decides most games. But I think for Northwestern, if the game gets into the 30s, they're kind of out of their depth, right? They got to keep it low. They're going to have to, well, I guess turnover is such a cliche, right? Let's assume all those coaching platitudes, right? So you got to take the ball away, win the turnover battle, and, you can't get behind the chains and you can't allow big plays. All those, we'll just assume that. I think the red zone is going to be key, right? Northwestern, when they get down there, they've got to cash in for touchdowns. And when Ohio State gets down there, they've got to prevent them, right? They got to force them to kick. They, exchange 3 points for 7. And Northwestern is number 7 in the country in red zone defense. It's something they've done very well all year. So, taking those other variables out of the game, I think that's going to be it, right? In the red zone, they have got to maximize their opportunities and take the opportunities away from Ohio State. And like I said, maybe, the second half, Ohio State is, what are they scoring their opponents, I think, by 11 in the second half, something like that. And you look at Northwestern's numbers, it's been 75-29. They've outscored their opponents 49-3 in the third quarter. So if they can withstand that initial barrage, I expect Ohio State to score early. Maybe they'll get the lead, just like they did in the 2018 game. Second half, maybe Northwestern can get a little momentum, make it a game into that fourth quarter, and then see what happens. I think that's their, that would be the best case scenario. And I think red zone defense, I think defense especially, but on both sides of the ball, it's what they do in the red zone that's going to determine whether they have a shot to knock them off.
And there you have it. And again, as I said, you can check out in the comments section for a link to not only our predictions at Buckeye Grove, but I will also post Behind Enemy Lines, where Louis will give his prediction as well in the game. And there you go with that. But Louis, I want to thank you for being part of the show. And, here's to everybody being safe and a good game. And, let's just get through 2020, because I'm sick and tired of not being able to go and see all of my friends on the media beat and everything else. And, while I'll be in Indy, I believe you told me you weren't going to be, so I'll be sure to eat some St. Elmo steak for you and everything along those lines.
Well, I appreciate that. Yeah. And, I'm thanks for having me. It's always good to talk about the game. And, hey, this is the second time in 3 years Northwestern's been in the Big Ten championship game. And, I was hoping to get Ohio State in this game. I didn't want Indiana or anything like that. I think 2020's got an asterisk next to it already. I didn't want to see it further, get further tarnished. And I wanted, Northwestern to get the shot at Goliath. So the Purple Nation is pretty excited about this one, and we'll see what happens.
Absolutely, and with only families there will not be busloads of Northwestern students making their way to Indianapolis. But if this becomes an every other year or so type of affair, maybe we can renew this here in 22 or whatnot. But I want to thank Louis for being part of the show, and I want to thank you for all listening to the show. And we will, of course, be in touch with you as soon as this game goes final. And then beyond that, we will be ready to talk about what Ohio State's potential bowl destination is once we kind of know the landscape. But that's for another time, another day, another show. It's the BIA Podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Noon. Thanks for listening.
Be sure to stay up to date with Buckeye Grove Instant Access when the news breaks or after the big game. Exclusively at BuckeyeGrove.com or anytime on SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Play, or Stitcher as part of the Unscripted Ohio Podcast Network. Hit that subscribe button so you can stay in the know and never miss a single episode.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to click on that subscribe button so you don't miss a single thing, and come visit us over at BuckeyeGrove.com for all the best Ohio State information on the web.